All right, everyone get ready, because today we are going deep into a debate that is tearing the World of Warcraft community apart.
Oh, this should be good.
Has wildly gone soft. You know, we asked for topics, and you sent in a ton of forum posts from players who are super upset because Azeroth isn't the grim and depressing place it used to be.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, read them.
It's interesting because this whole thing really shows this anxiety that some players have. Like, they're scared that if WoW W has, genuine joy or lightheartedness, it, like, undermines its credibility as, like, a hardcore fantasy world.
You mean those players who are convinced that every quest needs to be like, bathing in the blood of our enemies and just slaughtering thousands of demons because, that's what makes a game mature and sophisticated.
Yeah, exactly. It's like they're stuck in this phase where darkness equals depth and maturity. And, as someone who, has done a lot of storytelling, it's not about how much blood is spilled. It's about how you make the audience feel.
That's a good point.
Like,
Yeah, definitely. And, Malthadris actually brings this up in the forums because they kind of kick off this whole firestorm. They're basically saying, why does good writing have to equal doom and gloom? Like, can't a fantasy world have some hope and happiness without, being childish?
That's a great question. And, Malthadris makes a really good point here because we really need to separate the idea of good writing from, it always has to be bleak and depressing. Some of the best narratives, like in any kind of storytelling, they balance the darkness with, some lightheartedness and humor, even some silliness.
For sure. Like, it's all about the balance, right?
Yeah.
Like, you can't just have one or the other.
Yeah.
But then you've got those players like Final Fairs, I think, who are just like, but it's Warcraft. It's literally in the name. It's supposed to be about war.
Well, yeah, of course, conflict is like a core part of Warcraft. We can't deny that. But you can't reduce the entire franchise to just war that ignores all the, the world building and the richness and complexity of the world.
Yeah, exactly. Like, what about those iconic goblin explosions?
Yeah.
Those are hilarious.
Or even the dancing murlocs, or, that one quest where you had to help a gnome get his pants back from a giant spider. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Frizzlody actually brought that up in the forums, too. They were saying that both the darkness and the humor are super important to Warcraft and what makes it what it is.
Yeah, Bristlody's totally right, because Warcraft has always had that, like, weird and whimsical side,
Yeah. It's where
It's always been there next to, the more serious themes, and that's kind of what makes it so unique.
So we've got these two sides, right? Team Grimdark versus Team Lighthearted Fun. But then Veru comes in and throws a wrench in everything by bringing up Wrath of the Lich King.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
For those who haven't played, it's this super bleak expansion where you basically spend 2 years trudging through the snow, fighting the undead, and listening to Arthas whine about his daddy issues.
It was a good time. But Veru's point is that Wrath was one of the most popular expansions, so it begs the question, does popularity automatically mean quality? Or can a game be like insanely popular and still have a flawed narrative?
That's a good question. Yeah, because, I loved Wrath, but looking back, yeah, it was pretty heavy on the, doom and gloom. Maybe players just like to suffer a little bit.
Maybe.
But you also have to remember that player preferences, they change over time. What we liked a decade ago might not be what we like now.
That's true. Tastes change.
Yeah.
And speaking of changing tastes, Halen jumps into this whole thing and says that some players think dark means mature because they're secretly insecure about liking things that are, childish or just plain fun.
Ah, interesting.
Right. Yeah. Like they need to prove how grown up they are by only liking things that are super dark and cynical.
I think Kayla's onto something there because, there's this whole thing in our culture where being serious equals being smart, and I think that leads to this need to be super grimdark all the time.
It's like they're afraid to admit they actually enjoy those quests where you got to collect bear butts for some crazy hermit.
Exactly. But the truth is there's nothing wrong with enjoying things that are lighthearted and fun. It doesn't make you any less smart.
And thankfully, Fortuna steps in to remind us of that with this amazing quote from Babylon 5. They said, "We can't be free until we learn to laugh at ourselves."
I love that quote, and it's so true for this whole discussion because I think what a lot of players really want is for things to feel authentic. They want stories that feel true to what Warcraft is, even if those stories don't always fit into their idea of what that should be.
Right, and like Warcraft has always been this mix of serious and silly, and that's part of what makes it so great.
Yeah.
But then Marsage throws in another twist by bringing up the tension between combat and peace in WoW W. They're saying the conflict is like built into the game's DNA, but then Fortuna counters. and says that they play for the humor and the characters just as much as the battles.
That's interesting because it makes you wonder about the nature of the game. Can a game that's literally called Warcraft really be about peace without losing its identity? Or is conflict just too much a part of it?
That is the question, and it's a big one.
It is a big one.
And it's one we'll be digging into even more in the next part of our deep dive.
Yeah, definitely stay tuned for that.
But before we go, I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on this. What do you think about this whole darkness versus lightheartedness thing? Are you team grimdark or team fun? Let us know in the comments.
Yeah, let's hear it.
And be sure to subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into all the big questions facing the World of Warcraft community.
We'll be back soon with more.
See you next time. Okay, so on one side, you've got players who want WoW to be this, gritty, hardcore war simulator where every quest is like a bloodbath.
Right.
And on the other side, you've got players who are happy, just like chilling in their garrisons. Maybe crafting some legendary pole arms or going fishing with their battle pets.
I mean, hey, nothing wrong with that.
Nothing wrong with that at all.
But it's almost like two different games are kind of like smashing into each other in this one world.
Totally. It's a real clash of play styles.
Yeah. And I think that's what makes this whole debate so interesting, because it all comes down to like, what even is World of Warcraft? Is it about war and conflict? Or is it about, community and exploration and all that?
I mean, let's be real for a second. Most of us spend way more time running around collecting herbs than we do, raiding and fighting.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, way more.
And that's totally okay because WoW has always been about having all these different ways to play. It's not just one thing.
Yeah, you're right. It's always been this big, sprawling world with something for everyone.
Exactly.
But I think what some players are feeling is that the game's lost some of its danger, Like, it used to feel like your choices really mattered, and now it's all kind of easy.
Yeah, I see what you mean. It's like things have become a little too predictable, maybe.
Exactly. Like, there's no sense of consequence anymore.
Yeah, and I think that speaks to this bigger trend in games in general, where it feels like everything has to be super accessible to everyone.
Right. Like, everyone has to be able to win.
Exactly. And I mean, that's not a bad thing in itself, but sometimes it feels like it comes at the cost of, the core experience.
Yeah, like you lose that sense of challenge and accomplishment.
Right, exactly. And in Wild W's case, I think it's led to this feeling that the world isn't as immersive as it used to be.
Like, remember when they added flying mounts?
Yeah.
And suddenly everyone was just zooming over everything and ignoring the world below?
Oh, yeah, that was a big one.
Totally broke the immersion.
Yeah, it's like you lost that sense of scale. It didn't feel like you were really exploring anymore.
Right. But then you've got those players who say that accessibility is a good thing because it means more people can play and enjoy the game.
And they have a point, Not everyone wants to spend hours grinding or raiding.
Yeah, for sure.
So it's like, how do you find that balance?
Right. How do you make a game that's challenging enough for the hardcore players, but also still fun and accessible for everyone else?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Seriously. And it feels like Blizzard's been trying to figure it out for years.
Oh, yeah. They've definitely tried a lot of different things, like scaling content and dynamic difficulty, and even those separate servers for different play styles.
But it still feels like that perfect solution is out there somewhere.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, it comes down to this tension between, individual players wanting to do their own thing and the need for everyone to share the same world.
Right. Like, if everyone's just off customizing their own little experience, does it even feel like a community anymore?
That's the risk, yeah. And it's something that a lot of MMOs are struggling with these days.
So where does that leave us? Are we just stuck in this endless cycle of hardcore players complaining the game's too easy and casual players saying it's too hard?
Well, I don't think it has to be that way. I think there's still hope.
Oh, really? I'm all ears.
I think the key is to really embrace the fact that the player base is diverse. Different people want different things from the game.
So like catering to specific niches?
Not necessarily. It's more about creating a world that's rich enough to support all those different play styles.
So a world where the hardcore raiders can still, raid.
Exactly. And the casual players can still enjoy their fishing and pet battles and whatever else they like to do.
And the role players can, role play.
Precisely. It's about creating a world where everyone feels like they belong no matter how they choose to play.
Man, that sounds kind of utopian, doesn't it?
Maybe, but I think it's something worth aiming for.
Yeah, I agree. So, okay, we've talked about the hardcore versus casual thing and the whole accessibility versus challenge debate and how important it is to make a world where everyone has a place.
Right, lots to think about.
But there's another piece of this puzzle that we haven't really touched on yet.
Oh, and what's that?
Nostalgia.
Ah, yes,
What I mean is, a lot of the players who are complaining about WoW W going soft are players who have been around for a long time, you know.
the veterans.
Exactly. They've been playing since vanilla, maybe even longer. And for them, WoW W represents something really specific. You know, it's tied to memories and experiences.
Like that first time you stepped into Stormwind and your jaw just dropped at how huge and beautiful it was.
Or that amazing raid night when you finally downed Ragnaros after wiping for weeks.
Or that time you accidentally fell off the boat to Auberdine and had to swim all the way back to shore.
Oh yeah, good times.
Those are the moments that shape how we feel about the game.
And so when the game changes, when it evolves, it can feel like those memories are being threatened, you know, like something important is being lost.
It makes sense. It's a natural human reaction. We want to hold on to the things that make us feel good, that remind us of happy times.
But the thing is, you can't stop time.
No, you can't.
Games change, just like everything else.
And sometimes change means letting go of the past.
Which can be hard, especially when those past experiences are such a big part of who we are.
Absolutely.
So how do you balance that feeling of nostalgia with the need for the game to keep moving forward?
That's a tough one. No easy answers there.
I know, it's a real head-scratcher.
But maybe it starts with recognizing that nostalgia is a powerful thing.
Yeah, for sure.
And it can be both a source of joy and a source of pain.
That's deep.
Maybe it's about finding a way to honor the past without letting it control the future.
I like that.
But you know what? That's a whole other conversation.
Yeah, we could talk about that for hours.
We could, but we've already covered so much today, and I feel like we're just scratching the surface of this whole debate.
It's a big one for sure.
There's so much more to explore.
But you know what? I think it's time for a little break.
Sounds good to me.
We'll be back in a bit to wrap things up. All right, so we've talked about hardcore versus casual and accessibility versus challenge and the whole nostalgia thing.
It's a lot to unpack.
It is. But let's get back to the core question here. Can WoW W really find a way to bridge the gap between its, grim dark past and its more lighthearted present?
I think it totally can. And honestly, I think it already is in a lot of ways. Like,
Yeah.
even in those super dark expansions, there are always those little moments of humor sprinkled in there.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Right.
Like even Arthas, the Lich King himself, would crack a joke or two during those crazy raid encounters.
Exactly. And those moments didn't, ruin the serious vibe of the story or anything. They actually kind of made it better, by giving you a little break from all the doom and gloom.
Yeah, it's like those comic relief characters you get in like a Shakespeare play.
Exactly. It's about understanding that, humor and darkness aren't enemies. They can totally exist together and even make each other stronger.
So how can WoW W build on that? How can it embrace both sides, the silly Andy, the serious, without making either side mad?
I think it comes down to being really intentional about the tone and the emotions you're trying to create. With every quest, every storyline, every character interaction.
So it's all about the nuance.
Yeah, pretty much. It's
Yeah.
knowing when to go for the funny, when to go for the drama, and when to find that sweet spot in between.
So like maybe you have a quest where you're fighting off a demon invasion, but then along the way you also have to help a gnome find his pants that got stolen by a bunch of squirrels.
Exactly. It's those little moments of unexpected humor that don't ruin the stakes, but make the world feel more real and alive.
I love that. It's like saying, hey, even when the world's about to end, life still goes on. People still lose their pants, squirrels still go crazy, and goblins still blow stuff up.
Exactly. It's about embracing the whole human experience, even in a crazy fantasy world like Azeroth.
And I think that's what makes WoW W so awesome. It's a world where you can be saving the planet from some supervillain one minute and then helping a farmer find his lost sheep the next.
And it all fits together, It's all part of this huge tapestry of stories and experiences.
So where do we go from here? What does the future hold for WoW W storytelling?
That's the exciting part. We don't know. Blizzard's always been willing to take risks and try new things.
Yeah, that's what keeps things interesting.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I have a feeling they've got some amazing stories up their sleeves, stories that'll surprise us, make us laugh, and maybe even make us think about WoW W in a whole new way.
I'm excited to see what they come up with.
Me too.
Yeah.
So to everyone listening out there, as you keep exploring Azeroth, remember to enjoy all the different experiences it has to offer. The dark, the light, the epic, the absurd. It's all part of what makes WoW W so special.
Well said. And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive. Thanks to everyone for listening and for inspiring this conversation. And until next time, may your loot be legendary and your adventures unforgettable.